my fellow kin, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another tournament recap. On today's episode, we're going to cover all 5 games I played at the Grand Croisade Imperialis event held on the weekend of March 1st and 2nd. An exciting episode today as this marks not only my first team event ever, but also my first multi-day event, which of course culminated in us taking 2nd place out of 14 teams and over 100 players. So a really awesome experience, and I am super excited to walk you guys through these games and share my thoughts on the event as a whole. But of course, before we go any further, a massive thank you to our channel members: Jordan Stuckenschneider, The Pulp, Fusel, Sam P, Austri TM, Dabadakis, Travis Taylor, Aaron Easley, Smoky Miniatures, Mr. Wolf, Koramar, Chaos King Plays, Gregory Williams, Realist Chance, Musica Ex Machina, Michael Castile, Ron Helton, and Nicholas Stapp. Thank you guys so much for your ongoing support. It really does mean a lot. So guys, like I said, this was a team event, an 8-person team event to specify, and because of that, we're going to have to break this down a little bit more differently than what we usually do. So I have here on the side like the top 5 placings of this event, like which teams made top 5, and we have us with Slugfest in 2nd place, and I have our overall scores there for the team across all 5 rounds at 92, 97, 129, our only loss at 59, and then our final round victory at 103, which brought us to 2nd place out of all 14 teams. Our overall victory score, of course, was 4 wins, 0 draws, and 1 loss. For myself personally, my matchups included a brutal defeat of 0-20 versus Creations of Bile CSM, a very nice victory of 16-4 against World Eaters, a solid win of 14-6 against Auxiliary Cadre Tau, a loss of 3-17 versus Legion of Excess, and a final game victory of 12-8 against Gladius Ultramarines. And now, of course, because this is a team event, I'd like to just contextualize our team composition and talk a little bit about how team events work, because that will do a lot in terms of explaining how these pairings worked and how the matchups worked and things like that. So it's super important we talk about this. Now, for our team composition, we were running Eldari Aspect Host. We had CSM Bile. We had Legion of Excess, Custodes Solar Spearhead, Imperial Knights, Blood Angels, and Grey Knights. And then, of course, myself as the Leagues of Votann. Now, typically how these team events work is you essentially show up with your team, 5 or 8 people. In this case, it was an 8-person event, so we're an 8-person team. You get to the table, and you're paired into your opponent's team. And what you guys do is essentially play this little mini game where the team captain puts down one of the armies of your team face down on the table, a card of it, and the opponent's team does the exact same thing. These cards are known as the defenders. They are the first set of cards that hit the table across all instances of this kind of back and forth game. And what ends up happening is that we reveal those cards and the opponent's team places 2 cards in response from their army roster on the table as a potential matchup. The defender then looks at the 2 attacker armies and decides which one they want to play into. So there is this level of control, some kind of agency that you get as a defender, but overall the roles are basically broken down into being either the defender who is trying to get a draw game or a very, very narrow loss into an army that is an attacker whose primary goal is to 20-0 you. So it's kind of like this really interesting dynamic where the attackers are trying to go into a favorable matchup where they think they could table or basically just 20-0 the defender, and the defender's building an army and picking a matchup that they think they have a good chance of getting an even game into. So it's a really fun interaction, and I really just enjoyed this whole concept of the mini game going into it and deciding the matchups and the mind games and kind of just determining the matrix and which pairings would work best. You can make a whole video on this. I thought it was a really enjoyable experience and added just this whole other level of fun and complexity to the game that really just elevated the experience for me. Now, in terms of lists, so what I decided to bring to this event is a little bit different than what I usually represent and usually show you guys in my videos. And there's a good reason for that. So basically, the last game I played with my triple land fort list was in January, like early January, and I lost pretty brutally to Space Marines and said, okay, this is a new game now, the meta has changed, and triple land fort list I don't think is the way to go, especially with Eldari and Bridgehead. I felt like I needed to change my roster up significantly to have a chance into this meta. That, in adjunct to the fact that as a defender, your job is to try to play a list that no matter what can score high and try to match your opponent in terms of scoring even enough that there's a small differential between the two of you. I felt like I had to change the list up. We were playing around with a few different options for lists that I thought would work really, really well. A lot of just like activations, things that just spam score points on objectives, and your opponent can't really stop you from rushing to like 70 or 80 points. And ultimately, what ended up happening was a couple of things. So I got the flu, so I didn't get any opportunity at all to test any of these lists that I had like on paper had created and written. So no testing at all because I had the flu for 2 weeks. And then I also just did not have the time to paint or build or collect all the pieces I needed for those lists. So what I ended up doing was I went for something that I thought was a fair middle ground between my two goals. I wanted something that I'd have the time to paint and that I felt would also be good into this new meta of being able to like, well, specifically not get absolutely annihilated by some of these stronger armies by playing more activations, playing more MSU. And I also wanted to fulfill my duty as a defender and be able to get what I felt would be a good matchup, a decent matchup into any one of these pairings. So I ended up going with something that is very heavily inspired by Team France's Votann list that they took to Pyra this month. And taking it from the top, I included a Brokir Iron Master who has Appraising Glare. I have an E-Champ with a Darkstar Axe. I have 3 squads of Hearthkin Warriors. These guys have a Hylas and Magna Rail. I then have 2x10 Berserks with Mauls and the Grenade Launchers. I have an Infiltrator squad. I have a large 6-man brick of bikes as kind of like my shooting hammer. I have a smaller 3-man bike squad. I have 2 land forts. I have 3 Sagittars, each one equipped with Hylas guns. So there are some similarities here in this list, and in total honesty and truth, I wish I got to play a little bit more with this. I wish I got to play at all with this, as a matter of fact, before the event, but real life happens. I got sick. I couldn't really control that. So I did try to make something that I felt basically still just played a normal game of 40K. I feel very comfortable with Votann. There were only a couple of things here that mechanically I wasn't super familiar with how to effectively use them. Like the 6-man bike squad, for example, is something totally new to me. And of course, the 10-man berserks. But for 10-man berserks, they kind of just fulfill basically the same job the Hearthguard were doing coming out of a land fort. Like, that's the unit that just slaps. And it's also, I thought, really good because it's just a lot of wounds for armies to chew through, and you could stack them on an objective. You could just absolutely swarm the table with them. You could pin things down behind a line somewhere. And I thought that they were a really good threat, like, you know, to heroic intervene and get on an objective, things like that. So I felt like pretty comfortable. This is just like basic mechanics, so I felt like this was a good piece to include. I wouldn't really have a trouble utilizing them. And then all these warrior bodies here fulfilled that multiple activation, have a lot of good trading pieces that just stack OC on objectives. You can't really stop me from scoring with them. And then the last piece that was a little bit different was the Iron Master. Never ran the Iron Master before. And I decided to include him here just because I had so many vehicles that I thought would be playing a little bit cagier. So I felt like he'd be a good piece. He also has some pretty solid anti-vehicle output. And I'll share my thoughts on the list towards the end of the video, of course, when we look back on it. But going into this, the pieces I was least familiar with were the 6-man bike squads and the Brokir Iron Master, effectively. All right, so game 1. Now, before I go any further, I forgot to mention this a little bit earlier here, but essentially, as part of that pairing process where both teams are putting down defenders and 2 attackers, and then the defender gets to choose their matchup, you then do a roll-off between both teams, and whoever wins, their defender gets to choose which map they want to play on. This is super important. It's an integral part of playing teams because you need to plan a little bit in terms of which map you actually want to have your game on. And this, of course, means that you're kind of fighting for the best terrain possible against your opponent with this roll-off. So there's a chance you take the one they were hoping to get, and there's equally a chance they get the one you wanted. And of course, collaborating with your team, maybe there's a specific subset of terrains that you're team needs you to take because it's a little bit less favorable for them, and you could make it work. So for example, we were on WTC, and each one of these sets has a total of 8 different terrain sets you could choose from. There are 2 heavy terrain sets, there are 2 light terrain sets, and there are 4 medium terrain sets. Now, as Votann, my job here was to, if possible, take care of the light terrain sets. Now, Votann generally lose on light terrain versus shooty armies because we just simply do not outshoot shooty armies. We lose to them if we get into a direct firefight. So I was looking to get matchups that were a little bit more melee-centric and then grab the light terrain, make use of that. So anyway, with that said, game 1, get paired into my choice here, and I end up choosing to fight Creations of Bile. Now, on paper, my list does really well into Creations of Bile because Possessed have 3 wounds. They don't really have access to a Feel No Pain or reduction of damage. And if they're double judged, even if they get their +1 toughness, my Berserk squad on average picks up a full squad of 10. And I felt like this meant I could kind of match their tempo. I have direct answers to their threats, and I should theoretically be able to maintain a very even game and potentially even come out on top if I play it right. Now, unfortunately, I got 20-0'd here, so clearly something went wrong. And I think, honestly, going into this, one of the big issues was that I just simply never played against this army before. Theory is one thing. Actually having it on the table is another. And this is kind of a little bit of a recurring theme here for as we'll see with these other matchups, where it's sort of like going in there and you never played against something before. You kind of have an idea as to what you need to be doing, but executing that is somewhat different when you don't really know or aren't super comfortable with how that army plays, what it's trying to accomplish, and how quickly or effectively it does it. The math really ultimately is the thing that throws you off. So we go into this, I end up picking map 39, light. The mission was mission H, which is supply drop. So supply drop, as you know, we have these 3 objectives in the middle of the table in no man's land, and going into round 4 or 5, there are different ones that stay on the table. So in terms of my opponent's list, he was running Cypher, Fabius Bile, leading a squad of 10 chosen. He had a Chaos Lord with the Prime Test Subject Enhancement, leading a squad of 5 chosen. He then had 10 cultists. He had 2 squads of 5 legionnaires. He had a Nemesis Claw unit, 2x10 possessed brick, 3 rhinos, and he allied in 2 war dogs with the double Melta and the Reaper Chain Talon. So a pretty aggressive list. All right, let's talk about deployment real quick. So on my opponent's side, he has a Brick of Possessed over here, a Squad of Possessed down at the bottom here. He has a Rhino with Fabius Bile and 10 chosen in the middle of the table. Cypher right next to it. He has 1 War Dog hiding behind a Rhino. He has another War Dog hiding behind this terrain piece. 10 cultists strung out in the back, and another Rhino over here that has 5 chosen with the Chaos Lord, the Nemesis Claw. And then over here, he has another Rhino that has 2x5 Legionnaires inside. Over to my side, we have 3 bikes on this side of the wall over here. These guys can scout back if he gets turn 1. I then have a Sagittar over here with some Warriors. I have an E-Champ on this side as well. I have a Sagittar with Warriors inside, some Warriors screening for my land fort. I have some Warriors here sticking this objective and are just kind of ready to come up and get inside of this next Sagittar or land fortress. I think they were actually on this side of the wall since he had nothing in deep strike or reserves. I then had 6 bikes that were strung out over here, just ready to put some kind of pressure on this objective if they needed to. Really nice angle over here safely if you screen just to shoot out and clear whatever touches this. 5 warriors behind this wall screening the land fort again. My Iron Master here between both land forts, the Berserks inside, and then I had a Sagittar at the bottom. Now the other last thing I did here was put my Jaegers behind the wall. Now, going into this matchup, like I said, I've never played into Creations of Bile before, and I kind of had an idea how the army functions. I knew what it wanted to do, and I kind of approached this as I would if I were playing a World Eaters matchup. That was kind of like what I wanted to do. So I set up screens. I deployed pretty aggressively, like on the line, but I felt like I was relatively safe because I had these screens set up. Like here, I had some warriors they would have to chew through before he hits my tank. Then I also had like counter punches that were ready to go. And then same thing on this side, I was ready to just put something on this objective and force like 2 activations out. Same thing here, put something here, force 2 activations out to pop the Sagittar, and then get the warriors afterwards. And I had just like a lot of redundancies here with my screens. I felt pretty safe. And then the only thing that I was a little bit unsure of were my Jaegers. I think the right move in hindsight was to probably place them like over here instead, like this. And I think this would have been a better speed bump. Now, I was a little bit worried about the Chosen with Bile, so I didn't want to get like anything here in my backfield charged immediately. So I decided to play the infiltrators on this side so that at least I had something in the middle. This was a mistake. I think they should have been on this side of the table instead. I had enough tools here on this side of the table to do things like area denial or to do established locus, for example, contest primary. I had like theoretically 3 warrior squads that could do this. So the Jaegers, I think, really needed to be on this side and act as a better screen. So anyway, game starts and my opponent gets first turn and a supply drop, like I said, so we roll off for the objectives. This one is going away first, then this one goes away second, and this one stays till the end of the game. So I felt pretty good about this in terms of how I deployed. I had most of my stuff positioned towards the objective that was staying, and he was pretty evenly spread across the table. So like I said, my opponent gets first turn here, and what he immediately does is advance both of his dogs out into the middle of the table. So he advances this war dog out, just brings it right over here like this, advances this war dog out, and just like barely by half a centimeter manages to get like on this objective, just touching it like that. So I got a war dog here, a war dog here. He brings his rhino up into this ruin stage, ready to go out turn the next turn. Cypher moves up as well, just applying some more staging pressure over here. His possessed stay behind this wall, and he ends up bringing the rhino out over here to this objective. And then he brings over here on this side, this rhino out over here. Before this happens, of course, I do my scout moves. So what my scouts ended up looking like was I brought this Sagittar out over here like this, and I brought this Sagittar over here like this, ready to dump bodies next turn onto the middle. Over here, I think I just kept everything like this. He did not have the threat range to reach this. Had I come forward, he could have disembarked, moved, advanced, charged, and like if he got really lucky, he could have hit me. So I stayed back here. Next turn, I would just simply move out and get on this objective, so it wasn't really an issue for me. And then my bikes, I just kind of brought them back, and here they kind of just shuffled a little bit this way, ready to be like a counter punch in case something got out of this rhino. So we go to my turn 1 here, and I'm basically faced with 2 war dogs in the middle of the table that are open. In terms of my judgment tokens, I judged this war dog, I judged this war dog at the start of the game, and I judged, of course, the 2 possessed bricks. Now, my game plan here I felt was pretty sound. I had enough screens set up that I felt like I could be aggressive into his war dogs. And I really like this spot here specifically for my land fort because I would be able to simply move and get inside of this ruin, and then I'd be able to see anything that's here, and I could very easily threaten both of these objective markers with 10 berserks. So I felt this was pretty good in terms of like my deployment, how it was set up. And I felt pretty safe having all of these screens. So this screen here comes out, basically makes a line like this. This Sagittar with warriors inside comes out onto this objective over here like this. And then over here, I poke this Sagittar out a little bit this way. The Jaegers come out just to get OC to contest this war dog. And then I decide to move up with this land fortress over here just to see both of these dogs. And then my warrior screen takes the place inside this ruin where my Jaegers were acting as like a shield. Similar thing on this side, I just eject my warriors, run them up to here, and then I bring this Sagittar like over here like this so he could help see both of these dogs as well. And then as mentioned, this land fortress gets inside of this ruin, the screen's in front, I felt pretty safe, and I was able to see and shoot this war dog as well. So I had my whole army staged in terms of screens. I felt this was pretty good. This is how I would usually approach a game against World Eaters, except I think these Jaegers really should have been on this side of the table instead. Anyway, so we go into shooting. I put basically all my tanks into the 2 war dogs, and both of them survive. So that was really bad. I really kind of whiffed the punch. And this was not good because now I exposed basically my whole army a little bit more aggressively to hopefully pick up these 2 war dogs and alleviate some frontal pressure. And I had basically done nothing with them and just simply exposed them all to the punchback. So I do a last-ditch effort to grenade with my Jaegers to try to kill one of the war dogs at least. I do succeed. I get my 3 mortal wounds that go through, kill 1 war dog. However, Cypher's here, so it costs me 2 CP instead, which kind of hurt me for next turn. But I had to do it. I couldn't just leave 2 war dogs alive. And this war dog lives with 2 wounds. So we go to my opponent's turn, and this is where everything just immediately fell apart. So I felt like pretty good in terms of like my screens that were set up. It sucks that I couldn't kill anything. I felt like, yeah, I might lose a land fort if he gets lucky with the Melta. It's Melta 4 on the war dogs, which really hurts. But if he moves, I was going to overwatch him. He has 2 wounds left. If anything goes through, it's very likely that I kill it. So we go to my opponent's movement phase for turn 2. He gets his Bile Chosen Brick out. He kind of just gets like a nice big area like this covered, something like that. He brings the Possessed out. He advances them out. They land like somewhere over here. Over here, he disembarks the 5-man Chosen Squad and the character, the Chaos Lord. And he ends up getting them like over here with the advance from over here, the advance and the move, the disembark. They land somewhere like this. He also gets the Nemesis Claw out, lands somewhere like this. And then over here, he gets the 2 Legionnaire squads out. They land somewhere like this. And I think this is kind of where the knowledge gap might have also had an effect here. So I kind of played this as I would against World Eaters. Didn't really consider or realize that CSM actually has like pretty decent shooting, even if they're not running any shooting platforms. So he's able to very easily pick up my screens with his Dev Wound Guns on the Chosen. The Legionnaires have las cannon, so they're able to help chip away some wounds on my Sagittar. That's over here, kind of like partially hidden, so still getting a little bit of cover. And then we go into charges, and this is really where everything fell apart. So he does some multi-charges. He gets the Chosen with Bile into the Sagittar, into the Warriors, and into the Jaegers. Picks up all 3 like it's nothing, and then they consolidate beyond the wall this way after killing 3 of my units, and just kind of like fill up this space over here. A similar story on this side of the table. He declares a multi-charge with the Chaos Lord and Chosen Brick into my Land Fortress, into the remaining couple of warriors that survived some of the Dev Wound shooting, and into the Sagittar. The Nemesis Claw also charged the Sagittar and just apply more pressure this way. And the Possessed just clean run through the gap that's now here because I no longer have a formidable screen present with their advance in charge, and land into the Land Fortress with a massively long, like I think it was like an 11-inch charge. They get it off into the Land Fortress and tag it as well. So basically everything in my army is tagged. This turn he draws Bring It Down, by the way, just to mention. So he gets Bring It Down. This War Dog comes up over here as well and charges the Land Fortress just to take up more space. And then this, like everything dies. So this one Chosen Brick kills 3 activations, a tank, warriors, and my Jaegers. Over here, the Chaos Lord with the 5-man Chosen. The Chaos Lord one-shots a full health Land Fortress, just kills it. So the Land Fortress dies instantly. They manage to kill the screen, and they do enough damage to kill the Sagittar as well. And then over here, the Nemesis Claw pick up the 5 warriors by piling into them that had fallen out of the transport. So literally lost like 60% of my army turn 2 off of like 3 units charging me. It was pretty crazy. Like I think this is kind of like where that knowledge gap comes in. So like on 2 fronts, I didn't really know how much of a screen I needed to commit against CSM shooting, and I think that's why it would have been better for me to put the Jaeger squad over here, because there are more bodies that could soak the 5-man Chosen's Dev Wound Gun. And I think that would have kept a stronger screen up, and it would have been much harder for my opponent to land into my back line turn 1, or turn 2 effectively. Also with the Land Fortress, did not expect a Chaos Lord to be able to one-shot one. And again, I think this just comes down to not being comfortable with the math, not knowing how much screen I need, and like what kind of risk mitigation can I take. Like how much am I risking by bringing my Land Fortress out? Like had I known a Chaos Lord can one-shot this thing, I probably wouldn't have taken the chance and exposed it. I would have been a little bit more conservative with it. I figured, if it touches me, it probably picks up half the model, like, it kills like 8 wounds or something. Not that big of a deal. Again, also worth mentioning, my opponent rolls for his stats. He gets +1 to hit, and he gets +1 to his strength, which again further skews the math, as now everything is suddenly wounding my tanks on 5s instead of 6s. So there were just kind of like a lot of things going on that I think I just didn't really plan for. I didn't really anticipate happening. And from here, with Bring It Down, the game was already done. I think he scored like 14 points on Bring It Down turn 2. He killed like all my tanks. And I had no army left. And from here, it was kind of just trying like whatever little resources I had. I tried getting them on objectives to stall some primary as much as possible. My bikes tried to kill, and like my berserks as well. I end up killing a very large amount of his army, but it's just simply not enough to crawl back from the turn 2 and turn 3 point deficit I was in on primary, just literally getting 0 points on primary because he had all 3 of these objectives. Now, like I said, I spoke about everything that went wrong and why I think it went wrong and what I could have done differently. One of the other things I think that would have made a big impact in this matchup was disembarking or starting the berserks on the table. So I think I should have started the 10-man brick behind this screen. That way, if my opponent does charge into my screen with whatever's left, I could heroic in and clap back on my turn. And I think that's what I really needed. I just lost too many resources without getting any value out of them. And I really just needed more pieces on the table to try to slow things down. I could have even had my Berserk start on the table and try to slow down his Possess Brick. And that would have had a huge impact as well, because he made a really long charge. I think it was like 11 inches. And had I been able to reduce his movement and his charge distance by 4 effectively, I would have had my tank alive for another turn. So I think that was something I learned from this matchup. I would definitely play this a lot differently. And being the first game of the event, I felt extremely discouraged and embarrassed that it was such a big letdown for my team. Thankfully, everybody else had a really great game. And they all managed to do very well and get several 20-0s on their end, which helped secure us the victory for round 1. All right, so game 2, I get to my table. This one went much better. This was a solid victory into World Eaters, a matchup that I am extremely comfortable playing into. One of my team members is a World Eaters main, and we have countless reps with this matchup. I feel very comfortable with the game plan here and how to execute it appropriately. So my opponent was running, like I said, World Eaters. He had Mauler Fiend in his list. He had 2 units of Jackals. He had a Lord on a Juggernaut. He had Angron. He had Lord Invocatus. He had an Exalted 8-bound brick. He had 2 Rhinos. One of them had a squad of Berserkers. I think they were alone. And then he also had a squad of Berserkers that had a Master of Executions and Karn attached to it. Karn might have been with the other squad. I don't remember 100%. So this was kind of how he deployed over here. And on my end, I did my standard deployment into World Eaters, which is put everything on the line. It's the most effective. It is absolutely the most effective way to play this matchup, is do not be scared of getting charged. You need to let the World Eaters player charge you, but you decide what they charge by putting it in front. And if you do that correctly and you sequence it well, you have a very strong clapback and you draw out their key resources. So their key resources, of course, being the Exalted 8-bound brick, which I judged, the Mauler Fiend, which I wanted to pick up as well because it was one of the only things on this side of the table, and I ended up judging Angron, of course, and one of the Jackal squads, the one that was most forward positioned. This mission was the Ritual, so these 2 objectives here and here did not exist. There was only the center one, and you basically have to create an objective marker on your turn, ones that are exactly 12 inches away from one in no man's land and at least 6 away from something else. So I just saw how he deployed, and my game plan was really like, with his whole army on this side of the table, I'm just going to start like building my objective markers on this side and shift away from him, require him to take more movement. It's a pretty cagey mission by design, so I didn't have to be extremely aggressive here. But still, fundamentally, what you're aiming to do is just draw out those key threats and then neutralize them immediately. And so because of that, I put my Jaegers basically over here. straight down the line here. He had the ability to scout 2 things, and no matter what he chose to scout, it really wouldn't be able to do anything. I also picked this map, map 42 Light for Crucible of Battle. I thought this was a fantastic choice into World Eaters. You basically force them to come down this insanely tight firing lane over here that you can move block quite easily and stop Angron from advancing forward. And then over here on this side of the table, if anything crosses this line, it basically dies. And then same thing over here. So I felt like this was a very good matchup for me. I had a very solid game plan. And I decided to, again, put some screens here. So the Jaegers up front. I had a Land Fortress here with Berserks and some Warriors in front. I had my Iron Master ready to repair either one of these vehicles. Some Warriors that were in the back over here like this. I had 6-man bikes that were just chilling. I had more Warriors screening my other Land Fortress, my E-Champ behind, ready to heroically intervene if something happens. And I had, of course, 2 Sagittars up on this side that had Warriors, and a 3-man bike squad that was here ready to do containment. So we roll off, and my opponent gets turn 1. And as predicted, he ends up charging into the Jaeger squad. Now, my opponent made a really bad mistake here. I think he just wanted to full send. So he rolls, he gets advance in charge for his buffs. And then I think it was like +2 movement. So he just full sends. He basically brings Angron out like this way. The Exalted 8-bound come out this way. And then he disembarks the Berserkers and they come out this way as well. And then over here, he brings these Jackals out towards the middle of the table. The Mauler Fiend advances, gets like a solid 6 on it. He lands like somewhere here like this. For my scout moves, I ended up just like kind of pushing everything back a little bit over here on this side. And I brought these bikes up here because there was nothing that could reach them turn 1 even with advance and charge. And then over here, he does some charge moves as expected, and he brings both units into my Jaeger squad. So he brings he activates with the Berserkers, kills all of them, and the Berserkers get a Judgment token, which was good for me. Now, I think this was a big mistake for my opponent. He overcommitted too early on this side of the table, and there were 2 massive threats on his side that were now very nicely exposed for me. Over here, he gets a really nice charge off with the Mauler Fiend into one of my Sagittars. Didn't expect it to happen. I popped Armor of Contempt, and I managed to keep it alive. We go back to my turn, and I basically just do the Votann clapback. Everything is on my side of the table, so I have good control over my damage output here. So I bring out these Berserks. They charge into the Exalted 8-bound, kill all of them instantly, and that is great. I do end up, so something funny that happened here. So like I bring these Berserkers out. I shoot my gun, my mole launcher, into the Berserkers to slow them down. And he does his surge, which is fine. He rolls a 1. He surges a little bit forward towards these Warriors that are like screened over here like this. And then I bring this 6-man bike squad out this way, and I manage to get line of sight down the middle onto the Berserks. So I put, I think, like 5 of them into the Berserk squad. I leave like 2 guys alive, and he surges again. And I'm like, oh, like you could only surge once. And so he shows me like the app, and he's like, no, like it says here, like the wording is I can surge multiple times. And then like, you know, we called the ref over just to clarify. I'm like, hey, like I think like in the latest data slate, it said you can only surge 1 time. And the ref sides with him that you could surge multiple times. And I'm like, oh my God, no. So he does surge again. He ends up surging 3 times with this Berserker unit in the same turn. Thankfully, he only rolls 1, 1, and then 2. So he effectively just moves 4 inches, which is probably what he should have just rolled the first time around. So it did not have a big impact, but that very easily could have gotten out of control if more Berserkers had survived the bikes shooting into him. Meanwhile, on this side, I pick up this Mauler Fiend pretty reliably. I have a Land Fortress and 2 Sagittars that just blow it up. Really no issues dealing with that. Over here, I bring this 3-man bike squad out this side like this, because now the Mauler Fiend is dealt with. Everything in his army is over here, and nothing can interact with this side of the table. And so this 3-man bike squad puts all their shots with sustained hits 2 into the Judge Jackal squad, picks up the full unit. And now I'm feeling like the game's pretty much done. My opponent has run out of a lot of key resources. So like I said, I end up making some objective markers like on this side of the table. Just the plan is to just keep pushing them up this way. And then on his side, it's kind of like he's trying to trade in the middle. I send some screens out to like make a line and slow him down from hitting my lines on this way. Angron, over the course of the next turn, makes his way over to this way and is basically facing my backfield. And he does bring the full 10-man Berserk squad with the Master of Execution with Fight First onto this center objective. I don't let that stop me, to be honest with you, from charging with my Berserkers. I charge my Berserkers in. He has Fights First. I don't really mind. I fight on death. I have 3 attacks each, 4 with the Mole Grenade Launcher. These are going to be hitting on 3s because he killed my screen, and they're going to naturally be wounding on 2s because they're Strength 9. So I really don't care if he fights first. There's a very good chance that even if half of my squad fights back, which is average, I kill all of his units. And that's exactly what happened. I pretty much died. I lost like half of my squad to his Fights First, and then I just fought back and killed all of the Berserkers. So he had like literally nothing left. I end up looping around this way later in the game with my 3-man bike squad, charging into the Rhino on his objective and try to deny some primary. And then Angron does make it into my backfield, but I respond with 2 land fortresses and 6 bikes that are just waiting for him here, and I end up picking him up with pretty good ease. He does come back. He does resurrect round 5 of the game. So what I do is I just full send all my screens up this way and really just stop him from landing anywhere like on this side of the table. So the only place he's able to land is his DZ, which he takes, and then he does charge and kill like my 2 bikes that were alive over here, denying him primary, and that's when the game ends at a solid 16-4 for me. So I think this game went really well. I was super happy. I had a game plan here. I picked a good map that supported that plan, played it well with the screens, knew the matchup, and ended up getting a 16-4 victory as a defender, which is very nice because the defender's goal, of course, is to try to get a draw. If you get a draw, you've done your job. Anything more than that is a good contribution to the team. So I was very happy to have been able to recover from my embarrassing game 1. All right, so on to game 3. I get my cards that my opponents put as attacker here, and they end up putting Death Guard and Tau Auxiliary Cadre. I ended up going with Auxiliary Cadre. I felt like I had a better matchup into this game, especially looking at his list. I felt like I had the resources to play more of a slower paced control, just try to deny primary, pick up some key resources, and get a win here. So I did end up going for the medium terrain. I was a little bit worried about this matchup, I'll admit, because Tau usually trades a little bit better than we do, and then of course they just have better firepower, more consistent firepower, and if we get into a shootout with them, they usually win. But I took a look at his list and I felt like if we played on medium terrain, I might be able to play this well. So I end up going for this map over here, because I felt like it had very good support for my list design in terms of my 6-man bike squad and my 3-man bike squad. There's very good angles that you could get onto these objective markers over here, and potentially even threaten the backfield pretty reliably as well, if your opponent doesn't screen properly. Now, my opponent's list was running Dark Strider, a couple Cadre Fireblades with 2 squads of Breachers inside a Devilfish. He had a Kroot Lone Spear. He had 2 squads of Kroot Carnivores, a Pathfinder team, 3 Stealth Suits, 2 Vespid units, and some Krootox Rampagers. He then had a Ghost Keel, 2 Hammerheads with Railguns, and a Riptide. Now we roll off for deployment, and my opponent goes first, and he decides to put his Ghost Keel on my side of the table here on this objective marker a little bit aggressively. Now this mission was Scorched Earth, so the idea is you're trying to burn objective markers. So I felt like if I could just assert enough pressure on this one to control it for the whole game, then this is an easy 5-point burn for me at the end. And then if I could stall on one flank or in the middle, then I should be able to come out ahead. I felt like this map also kind of favored like my 10-man Berserk squads. There's a lot of good access to cover and protection, and good staging points as well to start pressuring my opponent's deployment zone if I had to. So on my end, I go with some warriors over here and my Iron Master, who's back here. I have a 3-man bike squad over here. I have my Berserks inside of my Land Fortress that are over here. I have 2 of my Sagittars that contain warriors that are ready to just scout up into this ruin and into this like little nook on this side. I put my 6-man bike squad over here, just nice and protected, in case he decides to do something with his Kroot and bring them out towards the middle. I have a response to that. I have some warriors screening over here for the Vespids. This is a really nice spot for them because you could effectively screen out like everything here, which is quite nice. So I end up putting some warriors over there in a little line. I have my E-Champ hugging the wall over here, ready to come out and stage. Some warriors also behind this wall over here. I have another Sagittar with warriors that are going to scout up to this wall, and I really like this spot because then you have access to deny primary on this objective and on this objective as well. And so the plan here was really scout up with this and then put these warriors out onto this objective, advance these warriors into this Sagittar, and then just do that again. So it's at least 2 turns of saying you're not getting any primary on this objective. So I really like that. Now this land fortress here, I was a little bit skeptical as to where I should put it. I was considering just putting it on the line here, but I felt like he still had 1 drop with a hammerhead. I didn't really want to risk it. So I ended up going a little bit more defensively back here with it. And this was, I think, the right move. Just to play it safe, there was no reason to start throwing resources away needlessly, especially when we're both trying to kind of play the same game. So for my Jaegers, this is the last interesting bit here. I end up putting my Jaegers out this way. So I put them 9 inches away, of course, and I stick some out over on this side of the wall. My opponent left me enough space to infiltrate here despite having his ghost kill on this side of the table. So he was unsuccessful in actually screening everything out. And by putting myself here, I was able to stop the scout move with these Kroot from just sticking this objective and running back behind the wall because this is a massive firing lane. So I decided to do this. I didn't care if the Jaegers died. I did their job just by being here and stopping this from happening. And my opponent, I think, did a pretty bad mistake. So he put his Pathfinders on his DZ objective. And I think he really should have been here. Like, this is where he should have put his Pathfinders. He needed to stop me from getting access to this staging point and just repeatedly throwing OC on this objective to stall the game out. So I think this was a big mistake for how he deployed. He had his Riptide over here. He had Dark Strider over here. He had some Vespid back here, some Kroot. He had 1 Devilfish with Breachers inside over here. He had more Kroot making a line this way. He had his Lone Spear next to one of his Hammerheads, another Hammerhead here, and the Riptide, of course. Over here he had some Kroot Rampagers, and then he also had another Devilfish with Breachers. So my opponent ends up getting turn 1. There's no way for him to wrap around this way and see my characters or get wholly within this ruin. So he ends up coming up over here like this to try to put some shots into one of my tanks. I didn't really mind this. It's only 2 shots. They hit on 4s. They wound on 4s for my land forts, and they're Melta 2. So no matter what, like, I'm going to live. So I really wasn't too afraid of this happening. The math just supported it. Over on my end, I end up doing some scouts, so I do bring everything up this way like this. It's just ready to go. Over here, I bring this guy up this way, and I end up keeping my bikes like this, and these bikes end up coming up over here safely behind this line so he can't get line of fire on them. So my opponent ends up bringing these Kroot out over here onto this objective. He brings these Kroot out over here onto this objective, and then he ends up doing a little bit of light staging. He brings his Rampagers out this way to try to kill my Jaegers, and I reactive move. I get a 5 on the move, and I end up just bringing all my Jaegers out on this side of the wall instead, facing the Kroot. So we go to my turn here. I end up picking up this ghost kill pretty easily with the units I have. I have a land fortress, I have my Iron Master, and I have 2 Sagittars. They pick this guy up no problem. I then also managed to pick up these Krootox riders that are standing here with my 6-man bike squad. They just kind of zip around this way to this good hidden point over here so I can't get fired on from anything. I'm super safe in this nook. These 3-man bike squads went up in the air, end up coming down over here on this flank, pop sustained hits too, and pick up all of the Kroot. And then I dump 5 warriors out on this objective, get these 5 inside of this Sagittar, and just get ready to do it again next turn. Over on this side of the wall, I bring this land fort out over here like this. So he can potentially shoot me with 1 hammerhead if he wants. He will not be able to shoot me with 2. He will not be able to shoot me with the Riptide. And so that means on average I live. And I didn't really mind taking half damage on this thing because it meant in response, I get to shoot all of his Kroot that are in the middle of the table. So I end up putting everything from the fort in. I put everything in from this Sagittar that's like up against the wall, and I end up picking up all but 1. The Jaegers here, they end up dying. So we go back to my opponent's turn here, and I'm feeling much better about this matchup because I feel like I have managed to deny him enough primary, and he's already running out of resources. All he really has left to contest this objective here is a Devilfish with Breachers. And once I get that out, I win this side of the table. So he does bring the Devilfish with Breachers out. He picks up my Warriors that are on this objective. I think he might even pick up one of my Sagittars. And then I just clap him back and pick up everything that's over here and take control of this objective for the rest of the game. He then does something interesting, and he brings the Devilfish squad with the Breachers out towards the middle of the table. I had expected him to go towards this objective instead, but what he ends up actually doing is he sends the Lone Spear out this way alongside the Hammerhead. So he actually gets the tank out over here, and the tank is unable to shoot anything by going here outside of these 5 warriors. So he picks up the 5 warriors with everything, that's no problem. But now I really don't have to worry about any shots coming through on this side of the table, and I could simply dump OC here and out OC him. So in the middle of the table, he disembarks his Breachers, puts everything into my Sagittar. The Sagittar lives, and then I just clap him back, kill all the warriors, and I think I had disembarked my Berserks. I charged my Berserks onto the Devilfish with my E-Champ. They consolidate onto this objective, and now I have 11 bodies in the middle of the table over here, and I'm basically demanding that he brings out his Riptide to deal with this. So he does end up bringing the Riptide out on his turn, but by then it's a little bit too late. Over here on this side of the table, I do the same thing again. I just dump my 5 warriors out, and I just stall another turn. So he ends up bringing in some things from reserves. He had like a 6-man Krutox Rider squad, I think. He had some Vespid, things like that. He brings the Vespid out here as well, just trying to deny more points for me. And at this point, he's completely out of resources. And I still have like 3 squads of warriors that are readily available to get OC on objectives. I fully have control of this side of the table. I still have my 6-man bike squad, and I still have my Berserkers that are in this land fortress over here. So he does not have the resources to deal with these threats, and ultimately it results in him just being whittled down to an 80-60 or 14-6 victory for myself. So I was very happy with how this game went. I was a little bit nervous going into Ox Cadre because it plays with the game that I'm trying to do, except a little bit better. But I did manage to exploit some of the mistakes that my opponent made. I really think the big one being deployment with the Pathfinders, and also just too aggressively staging his Ghost Kill over here for deployment when he already saw that I had access to all of this with a lot of heavy hitter tanks. It's difficult for him to respond to any threats I put over here, and so I think this was a little bit of a throw for this unit. And then over here, because he didn't properly screen out with his Pathfinders to deny my scout moves, I was in a position to deny primary for 2 consecutive turns. And of course, I did end up getting bottom of the game here, which meant I was able to scorch quite freely this objective and secure 5 points at the end of the game. All right, so next day we show up. That was 12 hours of Warhammer on day 1. And then the next day we show up and we get paired into the top placing team because, of course, we're 3-0 at this point and we're competing for podium. So we get played into top placing team. This is Team Quebec, Team Imperialis, and we do our matchups. And I decide to take Slaanesh on. Legion of Excess specifically. Now, Legion of Excess is a really, really powerful detachment, specifically because, so like the whole idea is the unit uses really strong data sheets and exploits those data sheets through their army rule, which turns off fights first when they do a charge, but it also makes them able to reroll all their hit rolls and all their wound rolls. So when you have an army that has a lot of dev wound weaponry, all you do is constantly turn off fight first and then gain access to full hit rerolls, full wound rerolls, and suddenly the math just gets completely skewed, and there aren't that many things that are able to survive units like 6-man Fiends. There are also some really powerful stratagems in the army that allow you to just negate damage completely across units. One big one, for example, is you effectively pick a unit that was shot, and then all the failed wounds that go through, like all the damage you take, turns into a mortal wound and is applied to something else that's within 12 inches of it or something like that. So this is particularly nasty with things like the Demonette squads that gain access to a 4-up feel no pain to mortal wounds. So you can effectively have a scenario where you put all of your shots into a target that should kill it, they turn those damage points into mortal wounds, bounce them onto the Demonette squad. The Demonettes have a 4-up feel no pain, and then they take basically no damage. So it's impossible to shoot and kill the thing you're trying to because they have access to so many of these tools to negate your damage. Another big one that was really impactful this game is you take a battle shock test when you're trying to shoot something, and if you fail the test, you can't shoot it. So you just can't shoot and you can't play the game. So tough rule set for sure. This was another matchup that I've never actually played into. It was all just strictly theoretical, my game plan. And on paper, I actually think that we have a decent game into this army. The problem comes down to the RNG nature of that rule that disables your shooting. And I think also just like the really overtuned ability to turn off damage by displacing it onto something else. Particularly for Votann, this is very difficult to deal with. There are some armies that have an easier time with this, such as Eldari, who don't really care if you do that because you'll just kill whatever it was that the damage was moved to. But for Votann, whose damage is a little bit more inconsistent and not as high of a ceiling, this is problematic. So I went into this game hoping to get a draw. I ended up getting a loss of 3-17. I think it would have been significantly tighter. I really do. We'll talk about why in a moment, but I really think that I was ultimately looking at a 14-6, and there were a lot of things that just didn't really work out to let that happen. So let's talk about deployment here. So my opponent was running Be'lakor, the Mask. He had a Keeper of Secrets. He had a Tormentor on an Exalted Seeker Chariot. He had 2 squads of 10 Demonettes. He had 3 Nurglings, 2 Seeker Chariots, 5 Seekers who have Scout, a squad of 6 Fiends, 2 squads of 3 Fiends, and a Soul Grinder. So my opponent's deployment zone looked something like this. He had Seekers that were over here ready to scout. He had a 3-man Fiend unit here. He had 6 Fiends behind this rune. He had Be'lakor over here. He had 1 Chariot that was over here like this, 1 Chariot over here. He had a Keeper of Secrets back here, 3-man Fiends over here. He had the Mask that was standing out in the open on this side, and he had his character Chariot over here. 10 Demonettes strung out in the back as well. He then infiltrated 3 Nurglings over here on this side of the table, and I thought this was a mistake. Because against Votann, you just judge it and you instantly pick up 3 CP. Like this really had no impact. It didn't stop me from doing what I needed to do with my scout moves. It stopped my bikes from scouting, which was fine. I actually think I put the bikes here when I saw that he started the game with Nurglings on this side of the table because I was like, this is just free CP. So I end up going with 3 bikes over here, my E-Champ behind this wall, 2 Sagittars with Warriors. I have 1 squad of Warriors kind of acting as a little screen here in case he decides to go full send. I have my Land Fortress with Berserks over here. 5 Warriors screening the back because he had Demonettes and Deep Strike. A Sagittar with 5 Warriors over here. I had 5 Warriors on the floor over here. And then I had a Land Fortress with Berserks that were over here. This mission was linchpin, and my idea here was not to get a win. I did not think it was possible for me to win this matchup, but I wanted to just keep an even game, as much of an even game as I could. So just try to get ahead on points as much as possible, slow down point scoring for my opponent, and just try to maybe like dominate this side of the table, take control of it, and stall over here as much as I can. So I get first turn here. For my judge targets, I judge these Nurglings for the free CP. I believe I judge the 6-man Fiends. I judge the Keeper of Secrets. And I end up judging the 3-man Fiends that are over here. My game plan here is basically shut down this side of the table as much as possible and stall here with OC and Berserks and a Land Fortress. Like just everything here gets sacrificed and just try to maintain an even score and then dominate over here so I keep getting 8 points a turn on primary. So we end up going into first turn. I start the game off. I bring the bikes up here. I pick up the Nurglings pretty easily. He can't scout because I have my Jaegers that are stretched out over here like this. And then I stage. I get these Warriors up. I think this Sagittar just comes up like over here. This guy comes up like over here like this. These Warriors come up to the wall to make a tighter screen like this. Over here, I scout this Sagittar up this way, and I send 5 Warriors out onto this objective. And then this Land Fortress, these Warriors get inside this Sagittar to do it again next turn. And then this Land Fortress just kind of waits over here because it's a pretty good access to a firing lane on this side and then also on this side. So what my opponent does on his turn is he brings the Soul Crusher out this way over here. He brings these Demonettes up over here like this. So they're within 12 of the Soul Crusher. The Keeper of Secrets stays over here. The 3-man Fiend Squad comes up to the wall. The 6-man Fiend Squad comes up this way. These Seekers come out over here to kill the Jaegers. These Fiends hit the wall over here from behind the stage. And the Mask comes out over here. And then the center of the table, he brings one Chariot out this way. And Bellicle remains to provide lone op to everything else. So he ends up killing my Jaegers with the Seekers. He ends up killing my Warriors with the Soul Grinder. And then we go to my turn. I believe I kept my 6-man bike squad over here this game. I don't quite remember where they were. They come into play a little bit later. They didn't do too much for me at the start. I think they were ready in case the Fiends came out aggressively over here or towards the middle. I had something at least that could respond to that with Volume of Fire, damage 2, which is quite nice into them. So over here, my bikes are safe. They kill this. I end up bringing my Sagittars up over here this way. Dump some OC on this objective. I end up sending Warriors out to replace the screen here versus the Fiends because I don't want to get hit by these Fiends. This Warrior squad ends up going out into the middle objective to deny primary. And then over here, I send another set of Warriors out onto this objective. I think I end up putting this Sagittar up here to shoot into the Soul Crusher, and then this squad of Berserks inside the Land Fortress. The Land Fortress itself just moves up a little bit here to also support and put shots into the Soul Crusher. So I end up picking up the Seekers, and I think I made a mistake here. So I had an opportunity to try to do something with this Mask. I think what I should have done, because, spoiler alert, the Mask ended up getting him I think 20 points this game. And I think really what I should have just done was walk these Warriors out like this instead and grenaded the Mask and tried to kill it. If I just killed this Mask that has 4 wounds, I think I literally would have drawn the game because of how much she did over the course of the next few rounds. Over here, this Soul Crusher has 1 token. He's touching this objective, so he gets 2 tokens. Because I put a Praising Glare. I put everything into it, whatever can see him. I end up taking him down to 3 wounds off of a lucky pop with the Sagittar. And then I put the Land Fort in, and he pays the CP to bounce the damage off to the Demonettes. So he effectively takes 0 damage, and I only kill 2 Demonettes because of their 4-up, feel no pain. So that was super annoying. And then he's going to just end up healing it back up in his Shadow of the Warp next turn. So we go a little bit back and forth over here. He sends his Fiends out. These Fiends end up pushing up this way. And we're just kind of just trading for a couple of turns. Now, honestly, up to, I would say, turn 4, the start of round 4, the scores were very, very even. I think it was 35-33, super even score game. And I was feeling very confident. The problem was that I was running out of cheap stuff to throw on objectives, and because of how his army worked with the deferring damage to other units, I just wasn't able to put things down effectively, and he was keeping all of his resources alive. So this was starting to slowly slip away from me. He ends up bringing the Keeper out. Something else that's also a little bit annoying that the army could do is everything has access to fall back and charge natively. So this makes it a little bit difficult because there are opportunities where you can charge something into them, and because you charge them, they don't have the option to get fights first, so they therefore can't forego that ability and gain access to reroll hit rolls and wound rolls. So there's a nice 1-turn buffer where you could charge something to potentially negate some damage if you wrap it, but if you don't wrap it, they just fall back and charge you again. So it's really actually kind of hard to find some kind of counterplay against this army. Is what I kind of found here. So anyway, he brings the Keeper out. The Keeper is unable to kill the Land Fortress with Arbor Contempt. I end up bringing the Berserkers out again into the Keeper. I put the Berserks, 10-man squad of Berserks into the Keeper along with a Land Fortress, and I only end up doing 8 wounds to it, which was a little bit unfortunate. I bounced pretty hard. He constantly has -1 to hit on his Keeper, so you're basically hitting them on 4s, wounding them on 4s. So you kind of drop half the dice on the hit roll, half the dice on the wound roll, and then they have a 4-up invuln, so they make half of their saves. And then they have a 5-up feel no pain. So it's really just impossible for my army to deal with this in terms of just straight damage dealing. So he takes control of this objective, and he ends up basically just getting a nice lead on me here. There's a couple things that happened that I think is where the game really fell apart. So this mask that I never bothered killing ends up making her way down this way over the course of 2 turns, and she picks up a land fortress that had like half wounds left because she has dev wounds. She picks up a warrior squad along the way, and then she's literally threatening my home objective where I just have 5 warriors on it. So this was very problematic for me. I tried overwatching twice. It should have died, and it didn't. And again, I had an opportunity to put it down potentially with a grenade earlier in the game, which I should have done because I just did not. Again, I just did not know this matchup. I didn't know how annoying this unit could be, and it is incredibly annoying. It survived. It just took 0 damage from the Overwatch, and then bottom of round 4. It ends up taking my home objective. So top of 5 when I score, I lose 3 points of primary for this objective, and I also lose 2 points everywhere else because objectives count for 5 if you have your home, and I didn't have my home. So this could have completely have been avoided had I just known that, had I just made the right call here and tried to pick her up when I had the opportunity. I think I would have been able to do it, and this would have saved me easily 8 points. Easily, had I just dealt with this 4 wound unit earlier on, instead of just relying on Overwatch to do it. Overwatch was a good backup. The dice just didn't cooperate, but I think I should have just dealt with her when I had the chance. The other big thing that happened that was unfortunate for me is that he had a chariot at this point that was here in this objective like this, and he had demonettes that were over here like this, and he was doing recover assets. Now, everything else in his army was out in the field or it was dead. And I had my 6-man bike squad go up and was ready to come down. I had 2 options here. I could have gone with my 6-man bike squad over here like this and shot everything into this chariot. Pop sustained hits too. It was double judged, and I probably would have picked it up. If I stop this from happening, he loses 5 points on primary, 3 points for recover assets, and that would have been an 8-point swing in my favor. Alternatively, I could have brought the bikes down over here. I had another angle like this, and they could have put all their shots into demonettes with sustained hits too, pick up the squad, stop him from getting, again, recover assets for 3 points, 3 points for his home objective, and it would have shut off the other objectives for giving the bonus 2 victory points. So the problem is that he has access to a strat that you literally have to take your battle shock test, and if you fail, you can't shoot the unit. So there's just a coin toss in terms of if you can do this or not. Do you pass the coin toss? Yes, you could shoot. Do you fail it? No, you can't play the game. So I had to make a choice. And the demonettes also had something he was saying that even if that doesn't work, they have a native ability built in with one of the characters that was attached that allows them to have a similar effect on me by rolling a dice. So there were 2 hoops I had to jump through to potentially kill this unit and have 2 chances of not being able to shoot it, or there was 1 that I could have done over here for slightly fewer points, marginally, but what also would have helped me. This would have been more impactful if it succeeded, but this is ultimately what I ended up going for because it was safer. So I put my bikes over here, and then I activate them to shoot into the chariot. He pops the strat, I fail the battle shock test, and I don't get to shoot. So I lost 8 points off of this, and then immediately he just falls back with the Keeper of Secrets, picks up all the bikes, and I lose this unit. This was in round 5, so it really was the last round of the game. I had this chance to get 8 more points to deny over here, or deny 8 points over here. And I think that, in adjunct to being able to kill the mask earlier in the game who denied me about 8 points or so, would have been a 16-point difference, which would have brought the score significantly tighter and given me something more akin to a 15-5 or a 14-6, which is really what I was hoping to get. This was just I think I actually do think on paper still we have a game into this army, into this detachment. It's not a great one, but I think we do have the option to draw it. I think maybe there were things I should have done to play this a little bit better, prioritizing the mask if I see her, which is definitely a lesson learned for next time around. So I'm just adding this in post because I forgot this happened and it was super important. At one point here towards the last round of the game, I think it was going into my final turn, Be'lakor is standing on this objective over here. And I have a Sagittar alive on 3 wounds. I have an E-Champ alive on 3 wounds, or 2 wounds. I have like 2 or 3 warriors, and then I have a couple of berserks that are touching this objective. The full squad of berserks is still kind of like strung out in the back, but on this objective I have those units. And then I take a battle shock test on everything that's below half strength, and my 3 wound Sagittar dies, fails the battle shock test, takes 3 mortal wounds because he rolls a 3 on the damage. My E-Champ fails his battle shock test on 2 wounds. He rolls the dice, takes 2 damage, he dies. And then the 2 warriors that were alive fail their battle shock test. He rolls his dice. They take 2 mortal wounds. They also die. So I effectively went from having 3, 4, 5, 6 OC extra on this objective to having just 2 OC instantly in my command phase. Because everything just died to failed battle shock tests, which was super unfortunate because this was another extra set of primary points that I could have scored to help tighten the game. So this ultimately resulted in a 17-3 loss, and unfortunately, the rest of the games that the team played were also similar in that those that did win didn't get high enough victories, and those that did lose got slightly too low in their defeats, and we just really couldn't get the win here. So this ultimately was our only loss at the event to this team. All right, so we move on now to Game 5, the last game of the event here. We're playing for second place, and I get paired into the option to face Knights or to face Gladius Marines. And so I ended up taking the Gladius matchup here. And it's one that I've historically said I think is a little bit tough for Votann. But I saw his list, and I think because he went a little bit too heavy on tanks, it gave me a significant advantage here if I could force a trade war out. If I could force a trade war, I win the game. So I end up taking medium terrain here. I go with map 1, and there was a couple reasons for this. So let me walk you through his list, and we'll see why in just a second. So my opponent was running Gladius Task Force Ultramarines. He had a Captain in Gravis armor that was decked out in reduced damage capabilities. He had Marnius Calgar that was leading a squad of company heroes. He had Rebute Gilliman. He had an Intercessor squad, 2 Ballistus Dreadnoughts, 1 Incursor, 1 Infiltrator, a Predator, and 2 Scouts. He also had a Storm Speeder, and he had 2 Vindicators. So if you pay attention to the list, you'll see that he effectively only has 2 Scout squads, an Infiltrator squad, and an Incursor squad that could play the mission. He does have company heroes for sure, but that's more of like a hammer unit. But he really only has 4 things that could actually play the game and not feel bad about not shooting or doing any actions. So my game plan here was to basically force those units out as early as possible, or try to kill those units as quickly as possible, so that he had to start using his big things immediately and ineffectively. And if I could get that to happen, I have enough tools and resources in my list to still play like a regular game of Warhammer and pick up those units. So I felt pretty confident that I could get a very easy draw on this map and on this mission and in this matchup based on that information. So this one here was just regular take and hold hidden supplies. So this middle objective marker didn't exist. We had 1 on the left, 1 on the right. And for my opponent here, he had Calgar with the company heroes up here. He had Scouts that infiltrated over here, Scouts over here at the bottom, Infiltrators here, double Vindies in the back, a Predator over here, 2 Ballistas. He had his Incursors with 1 character next to them, and he had Gilliman that was kind of in the middle of everything. So on my end over here, I have 6 bikes. I have 5 warriors over here, 5 warriors here with a Sagittar. Again, this is just like dump OC, deny primary as much as possible, and bait out those units. I then have 5 warriors here, 5 warriors and a Sagi, my Iron Master, 2 Landforts with Berserks in the middle and each behind the wall, some warriors over here as well, more warriors in this Sagittar, 3 bikes, and my Infiltrators up here for my Jaegers. So I picked this map because it has very nice access to firing lanes for all the objectives except for the home one. And I didn't really care about threatening the home one. but I really wanted to be able to push for these objectives over here. And I really like the middle because he has a tank heavy list and it is incredibly difficult to get good line of sight into the center of this brick over here. And if I was able to get units inside of here, it would be very difficult for him to interact with me without overcommitting and overextending units. So he would really have to push up and get in an uncomfortable position close to me, which would allow me to punch back very effectively. So I was really happy that I picked this table and I was able to adapt my strategy for this, what I would consider usually an unfavorable matchup. So my opponent gets first turn here, and he ends up basically just staging Vindies up this way like this with access to this firing lane. He pulls these scouts back because this was one of my judged targets. I also judged the double ballistas, and then I judged the Calgar brick. I think in hindsight, I probably could have gotten away with judging something else instead of the Calgar brick, but I did want him to just respect the ability that I have +1 to hit, +1 to wound against it, in case he does decide to expose this early, because it's extremely durable to get through. So with the double tokens on it, it does help at least allow me to punch a little bit better into it. So a very passive turn one for my opponent. He ends up just playing for 10 on primary, which is totally fine because this is hidden supplies. There are 6 objectives. So if he's confident he could get ahead later in the game, then there's no reason to push so aggressively turn one and expose all of his little resources that play primary. So on my turn, I end up keeping these Jaegers back here. I end up doing some scout moves. So I get this Sagittar up here, of course, and then on my turn, I move these warriors up. So here I dump these warriors out onto this objective to auto-see his scouts. These warriors get inside of this Sagittar. They're ready to do it again next turn. He can't really interact with the Sagittar behind this ruin, so he's nice and safe. And then over here, I get this Sagittar behind this wall over here, ready to send bodies over here. And then I dump some warriors out like this, just kind of like strung out over here, because I think I drew area denial, so they're just hanging out like this. My Berserks and my land forts just stay here as so. And then these warriors get inside of this Sagittar and again are just ready to do it again. So at the end of my opponent's turn, I do send these bikes up in the air. They come down in my DZ over here and I pop sustained hits too, and I pick up the scout squad fully. Even if he popped armor contempt, he's still saving on 4s, and I'm damaged too, so this is a really clean profile. So I safely managed to pick up all of these scouts without any punchback in return. I also had sent these 6-man bike squads up as a deterrent, and I did not bring them down. I just waited to see what my opponent would do. There was no reason for this, but I was kind of just playing some mind games here because if he did decide to be aggressive with this brick, I wanted to be able to rapid ingress something over here and say, hey, back up because you might lose like your big squad. So it did manage to work as it stopped him from applying too much pressure on this side. We go into my opponent's turn 2. He ends up punching me back as expected. So the Vindicators come out like this. They pick up the Warrior squad, of course. And then he brings like these guys up here, the company heroes, and only 2 are able to see the Jaegers. And he brings down his Hammerhead over here like this, like sticking out a bit, so he could see the rest of the Jaegers. And 2 company heroes and a Hammerhead pick up 10 Jaegers, which, sure, that caught me off guard. Like, that was a bit unlucky. But he manages to pick up all 10 Jaegers, so I don't get primary on this objective, which was a little bit annoying. Like, the math just did not support that at all. But sure, it happens. In the middle here, he brings his Incursors out to trade with my warriors. He picks up all 5 of the warriors, and now I have him exactly where I want because he has no more trading pieces left. All that he has are tanks, and he doesn't have the Vindicators are scary tanks, but on my turn, because this Vindicator killed the warriors and is standing on the objective, I get to Appraising Glare, double judge it, and my 2 forts and my Sagi get to all go into it if I need them to. So what I end up doing is exactly that. On my turn, I get these warriors, eject them behind the wall over here, and then the next set get inside of this vehicle and are ready to do it again. This is one of the mistakes I made on his turn. I rapid ingress, like I said I was trying to do like with my bikes, And then after I did it, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to end up killing like this company hero brick. There's literally no reason to. I'll just keep it here as a deterrent, which worked. Like I guess he just didn't feel comfortable with the math, and he did not push as forward as he would have liked to once I rapid ingress these guys here. So I end up just using like this Sagittar over here, nice and hidden. This Sagittar poked out a little bit over here like this. And then these two land forts poke out this way, and this Sagittar pokes out this way. And so I put these two land forts and this Saggi into the Vindicator, pick it up, no problem. And then here I put these two Saggis into the Hammerhead, or the Strike, whatever it is, pick it up, no problem. And then in the center of the table, I end up dumping more warriors again out of this Sagittar to just stand here. And this land fort that was like over here managed to put his twin bolters in and pick up the rest of the incursors. So now I really had control of all three of these objectives. The only thing he could do to stop me was really just try to send his company heroes full send and do a big push. So he does do a big push on his turn. This one Vindicator that's left over again tries to pick up the squad of warriors. He succeeds. I think actually one warrior survives by spiking the 4-up invuln, which was pretty nice. And then over here, the ballistas step out to try to trade with the land forts. This one comes out over here as well, and this predator comes out as well. They pick up one Saggi that's stuck out over here. Unable to kill the land forts, I pop Armor Contempt. I have access to cover, so I'm able to survive. And then we kind of just, in response to that, pick up another one of his tanks, the other Vindicator, and at this point I felt like the game was well under my control. So I do a big push with my land fort. I push it out this way. Next turn I'm going to full send with my Berserks. He doesn't really have the resources to stop me. I end up charging his ballistas to tie it up a little bit. He can't really get on the objective to stop this from happening. So I end up bringing my E-Champ out to stage over here to push forward, and he ends up drawing Assassination. So what he does is he brings these scouts out this way, because it's the only piece he really has left on this side of the table, to try to kill my E-Champ. And they fail to do so, and then in response, like, they die. And then from here, I really feel like I have control of the game. So he brings this character out. He has nothing left to trade. He brings the character to try to kill my warriors. He kills the warriors. Then I clap him back with my Berserks on one of my land fortresses. And then Guilliman comes out. And Guilliman does a sweep profile and picks up all 10 Berserks, which caught me off guard. Like, that's a lot of wounds to chew through. But he just picks up all 10 Berserks with a sweep. Fantastic. So he did manage to do that. So then I end up just pushing my E-Champ up here. I shoot him with a land fort. I shoot him with my E-Champ. I think I grenade him with, like, there might have been some warriors left over. I grenade him. And then he dies. He resurrects. And then I just charge him and kill him again. So Guilliman didn't really serve too much of a problem for me here. And I ended up completely dominating on this side of the table. I was really happy with how this game went, actually. This was probably the game I played best out of the event. I had a very clear game plan going into this, like just analyzing his list, analyzing the matchup, and then picking a table that I felt would appropriately support that game plan. And then, of course, managing to pull out a 12-8 win here, which was very nice for me because, of course, I was a defender. I was just aiming for a draw. So being able to get a little bit ahead and helping the team get some points is great, especially knowing that we managed to get second place because of our point count. So this was a great experience, and I was really happy with how this game went, and super proud of the performance of the list here. All right, so just to close up this video, I just want to talk quickly about my thoughts on the list, how it performed, and some changes I would make. So in all honesty, I was extremely disappointed with the 6-man bike squad. I didn't think it was that great. I thought it was very difficult to get good angles on it. There were a couple of games where, yes, like this unit can consistently pick up whatever it shoots at. Like it contributed significantly to killing Angron, absolutely. There's some other games where Marines just melt to it. Like that's great, right? Like this is really nice. Not that much of an issue. Like into the Tau matchup, it was also quite good. If you get an angle where the Riptide can't touch it, then in response you could pick up whatever you shoot. So I do think like the 6-man bike squad is objectively good. I just didn't really enjoy using it. I will say that my 3-man bike squad was actually MVP for me. I would much rather have multiple smaller 3-man bike squads and pop sustained hits too on those units instead. Because like unless you're dealing with a massive anvil like Angron that needs to be put down with just like an insane amount of firepower, then the bike squads are significantly more effective trading pieces. And I do think this meta, of course, supports more of an MSU playstyle. So for me personally, I really like the 3-mans. I think next time for teams, I'm probably going to just go with 3x3 on the bikes. You have a little bit more control over your matchups here, unlike with singles. So, you know, if you know that, oh, I need firepower to put down this triple Votann list, just pick something else instead for your matchup. So I think like overall, this is the biggest thing. I don't think the 6-man for me was like a hard sell. I still have to play around with it. Again, keep in mind, I only had one practice game with this list. And then I played the 5 games at this event. So I still have a long way to go in terms of understanding how this properly works and how to properly utilize this unit. But just initial thoughts, I didn't really like it too much. I preferred the 3-man. I'll say the other thing that I didn't really enjoy was the Iron Master. I think every single game I would have preferred if I just had another E-Champ that had the Mass Hammer instead. Just straight up, I would have much rather have had that. If something shot my land fort, it usually killed it in one go. And the Iron Master, in response, he just like, I find even shooting into vehicles, even charging vehicles, he just never really connected. He just never really did what he had to do. And I think even against indirect lists where you could say, oh, well, you know, you have the extra bodies to soak shots. Yes, but you save on 4 versus the E-Champ who saves on 2s. So I think personally, I'm going to go with the other E-Champ. I think it just supports my play style a lot better. I could be more aggressive with it. It's a better heroic intervention threat. And I think that's going to be the primary change I make for sure, is take another E-Champ instead of this Iron Master. Really like the 3x10 Warriors, to be honest with you. This might even become a staple in my singles lists, just having the bodies to have one extra turn of baiting out trading pieces that your opponent has. Like, you know, whatever little utility stuff it has, you use this to draw it out. Like, it gives you a little bit more of an edge in the resource war, which I felt was extremely helpful at this event. The 2x10 Berserk squads were fine. They always did a lot of damage, except into the Legion of Excess matchup, where the -1 to hit was quite punishing. But I did like them overall. I thought that was quite fun. I thought that they worked very well here, so I could totally see myself running them again, and no real complaints on that front. So that's the event. We ended up taking, like I said, 2nd place out of 14 teams. I was incredibly happy. Like, you know, like the meme where there's like the guy on the podium who's popping the champagne, and there's like just like a ladder of people next to him, like all looking down, like, why is this guy so happy? That was awesome. It was just such a great experience. I was really like disappointed with my performance game 1. But like after understanding the matchup a little bit better and saying like, oh, okay, like I probably should have just done this and this instead, I felt like, you know, it wasn't like a mental competency issue. I think it was really just like I didn't understand like how the game was supposed to play against that army. So really happy, really proud of the team, really proud of myself. I had a ton of fun. Teams are an incredibly good experience. I genuinely liked it a lot more than playing single events. And I would strongly recommend, if you have the opportunity to participate in a team event, try it out because it is very, very fun. So a massive shout out, of course, to my team, who without having them on the team, none of this would have been possible, of course. I think everybody did a great job at understanding their matchups. Everyone did a fantastic job at contributing to the matrix. And of course, our team captain for setting us up for success with some incredibly strong pairings. All right, everyone, a little bit of a longer video. This was the first 5-game recap event I ever had to do. So still kind of like toying around with how I want to do this format in the future. This was probably a little bit too long, so we'll see about maybe cutting these into 2 parts for future events. I am planning on attending more team events this year. This was a great experience. I really had a ton of fun, and I am super excited to get more of these reports back to you guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this kind of content and video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment for me down below. A massive thank you to our channel members for all your ongoing support, and to our channel sponsor, Card Brawlers, for all your Warhammer needs. With that said, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.